So Microsoft and Sony are both starting to leak, or at least people that are in the know are leaking the hardware specs. And it looks like the PlayStation 6 is going to be considerably weaker than the next generation Xbox. Now, whether this is due to Sony trying to keep the cost low, or the fact that they're going to have a weaker handheld that will run all of these games and essentially become their Series S, is quite unknown. Of course, none of this is certified, none of this is confirmed. It's all kind of leaked information and should be taken with a grain of salt. Now, some of these specs have actually come true in the past. However, as we saw with the Xbox Series X and the PS5, in most cases, though the Series X could look better and did look better, it did suffer in frame rate where the PlayStation 5 was pulling ahead, locking it at 60 in performance mode. So we do have that in like comparison. So this power argument that we're seeing happening all over again seems to be a nothing burger. Wait till the machines come out and decide what you want to get. If you're that really hell bent on power, go build yourself a PC. Then you'll have the king of power. But whether this one runs 3 frames more or that one runs 5 frames more, no one gives a crap. But Moore's Law has been going around and talking about this non-stop, and obviously it's Xbox bad and PlayStation all the way. Because after reading this, my brain hurt. Right? My brain hurt. But we're going to go through this post because I think it's kind of disingenuous with what he's saying, because, well, you know, rewind back to when the Series S and X launched, it's essentially the same thing, but when Microsoft did it, they're holding back the community, they're holding back gaming. But when Sony is about to do it, potentially, they're not holding back gaming. This is what gamers want, and this is the best thing for gaming. Do you see the contrast in the terminology there? Do you see how one is bringing upon the apocalypse, Armageddon, it's bringing about the end of times, whereas the other one, oh my god, this is what the players want, this is the holy grail, this is the moment you've been waiting for, ladies and gentlemen, let's get going, kind of attitude. So you can see where he's actually aligned on the scale here. Whether he wants to admit it or not, this post pretty much confirms that. So let's go through this post and see what he's actually saying. PlayStation Canis is the most important PS6 APU to watch in terms of what could impact the most gaming the most in 27-28. Now obviously here is already a bit missed because Sony have said that they don't really want to release the PS6 before 2030. They're already working on ways to improve the PS5 Pro with AMD's new technology that they're going to try and push forward via software and hardware that's already inside the PS5 Pro to give it that bit more longevity so they can get more life out of it to, you know, extend its duration while they work on the PS6. So that date there is already up into question and doesn't kind of make sense. Now, if they said 28 to 30, I'd say, okay, he's given himself a broad 2-year window, but the fact that he's saying 27 goes completely against what Sony is saying. Now, I'm only saying what Sony is saying because these guys are constantly saying, well, Sony said this when it goes against them and kind of works in their favor, but when it doesn't work towards their agenda, it's now, well, we don't care what Sony says. We are the CEO, we own the board, we make the decision, so 27-28 is what it's going to be. So I'm going to ignore that part entirely because that just seems like a guesstimate and whatever. Sorry, fanboys, he says, it doesn't really matter if one console wins performance by 10% versus 30%. So this is going against Cole Eastwood, who made a recent video saying that the next Xbox console will be 30% more powerful as opposed to PlayStation's, who is going to be running at 160 TDP. Now, obviously, this is, you know, he's already talking about fanboys and saying, sorry, fanboys, but he's already gotten into the console wars straight in with that bit right there. The experience will be the same. Who cares how close Orion and Magnus are? Magnus being the Xbox new hardware, Orion being the new PlayStation hardware. Canis is the PlayStation Portable handheld, the new handheld for PlayStation. We already know they will be close. Well, yes and no. 30% is a lot compared to 10%. If it actually materializes that way, if it does, we can see the difference in PC graphics between a 30% gain and a 10% gain. There's a big difference there, right? There's a big difference. I'm not saying that Magnus is actually going to be 30% ahead, and I'm not saying that, the developers are going to utilize that 30%. We clearly saw with the Xbox Series X that they didn't utilize it because PlayStation was a platform they catered for, and as such, that being the platform that they built first, it just ran better because that's the platform they built it on. So let's see what else he says. What's holding back graphics right now isn't devs supporting a 10 teraflop PS5 versus a 12 teraflop Xbox Series X. It's the PS4 and Xbox One with a hard drive and a Jaguar CPU. Now that is in part correct because a lot of companies are still supporting the PS4 and the Xbox One, but everyone seems to blame the Xbox Series S anyway, so I don't know. Conclusion. If Sony can manage to make the Canis handheld APU roughly match PS5 performance, now we've already seen that the PlayStation 5 has a lower clocked version within the firmware that is basically makes the games run worse. Now obviously, no one really kind of wants this, no one really understands why it's there, but it's clear why it's there. It's there for the Series S and Canis. So they're trying to optimize the games for that lower end spectrum now, so they kind of have a bunch of games available off the bat to release on this new handheld. Regardless of whether they're old or new, it's going to have a broad catalog for you to use natively on your handheld. So that's where that's coming in, with obviously better CPU, ray tracing, AI, etc. in a far cheaper package, and they sell that in a $299 budget console. That's what would actually get PS4 gamers off their asses to upgrade to something that in no way will hold back modern games. Now that's not entirely true because the Series S was a very, very affordable console at $250. Even some places were doing it at $230. But people weren't upgrading from their Xbox One because through Game Pass and cloud gaming, you could actually play. And cloud gaming is available on some of these consoles, so why would they upgrade, right? So it doesn't quite make sense what he's saying here. Now, obviously, companies still supporting the PS4 and the Xbox One, it's ludicrous, but the market size there is crazy. As such, people don't want to throw away that marketplace, unless you're Nintendo, who's outright said, we're only going to be supporting the Switch 2. Switch 1, good luck with you. And they just threw away 140 million, customers. It's weird. So I don't actually agree with this. So I agree that the PS4 and the Xbox One need to kind of be removed now. But in this situation here, when the next generation console lands, if he still believes that the PS1 and Xbox One is going to be relevant, that's crazy. But if he also believes that the PS6 handheld is not going to be the lowest denominator and be the bottleneck for all games going forward, eating another way home. The new PS6 handheld will be the new Series S, and it's going to hold back gaming. To assume that it's not, going to have the same effect as the Series S is ludicrous. And if they are going to put 16 gigs of RAM and a good processor in there, one that is the same as the PS5, into a small form factor, do you honestly think in this day and age that they're going to subsidize that to the point where it's releasing at $200-300? I mean, these people think that the PS6 is going to come out at $500. It's crazy. Having Canis as the minimum spec by 2030 would be a godsend to the industry. You can clearly see that this is completely and utterly bonkers where they're going. Now, one thing that Sony is doing, like I said, is reducing their TDP, so they are making a weaker console going forward. Now, how much weaker that will be and how AI will work with that and how AI will improve upon that and what Sony is working with AMD is going to benefit from that is unknown. No one really knows. But if Sony decide that they're going to make the PlayStation Vita 2, whatever you want to call it, Canis, the base model that games are going to be built on, that's going to hold back the gaming industry. And if we don't see developers complaining that that's holding back the gaming industry, there is some serious problems there. Because clearly they want those checks cleared. That's the only thing I can think of. And Moore's Law is dead, turning around and making this hot take. I mean, it's not a hot take, it's just a stupid take. At the end of the day, everyone knows, and at the end of the day, everyone blames the Series S as being the weakest denominator, and because they have to develop for that, that's the weakest point, right? So Sony doing the same thing now is going to be a godsend to the industry. Is this guy crazy, on drugs, on Kool-Aid? What is he on? Because none of that makes sense to me. None of it. But if it makes sense to you, what you need to do is leave a comment in the description below and telling me why it makes sense that a handheld that will be weaker than your next generation console, your PS6, which is going to be the lowest denominator, which means games have to be built for that first before they're built for the PlayStation 6, is not going to hold back gaming. Let me know in the comment section below. Let's have that discussion, and I will see you in the next one. Peace out and remain legend.